Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to TED Talks Ball. Got a Thursday afternoon edition. We got Suneil, So Real Suneil, on here. May know him at So Real Suneil on Twitter and at So Real Sports Talk TV on YouTube. You see him with Jesse and all the top creators. He's awesome, and obviously has his own show too. That's amazing too. So Suneil, thanks for joining. Tell everybody anything I may have missed. Also, love people to promote their stuff when they're on my show. So, like anything you got coming up that you want to talk about, you want people to know about, tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I appreciate the invite. To come on your show, Ted. I see you on Twitter all the time with your hot takes and getting into it on there. So it was good. It was nice that you reached out to me and we finally made time to make it happen. As far as me, I do a regular show with Jesse on Tuesday nights. I also do usually a regular show with Rohan Chakravarti either Wednesdays. This week we're doing it on Saturday. So yeah, I mean, if you did a great job plugging everything where they could find me, and if you guys like what you see, feel free to go subscribe and follow me on Twitter. Would really appreciate it.
There you go. Yeah, everybody give Suneil a like and a subscribe. It really helps us out to keep doing what we do for you. I do want to plug some of my stuff for tomorrow just because yesterday when I was on with Aaron, we do our First and TED show every Wednesday at 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern. And somehow when I went to look at stuff, I had next week's calendar up. And I'm like, oh, I'm open tomorrow at 3, like right now. So I didn't even mention our show. And then I didn't see anything that I had for Friday. But I've got Anshul in the morning at 10, Dr. Pandya at noon, and Jeff DiMatteo, who I met on a 49ers panel at 3. Those are all Pacific times, so do the math. But 3 shows, busy day tomorrow on TED Talks Ball. But yeah, and we can talk about these all at the end of the show too. But I like to do both, especially if we like run out of time or something. I like to make sure we at least get it in at the beginning too. So real quick, we got some people showing up already. Some good turnout. We got Jimmy Perez in the house saying, "What's up, guys? Hey, Jimmy, how's it going?" We got Jess from East Coast Red and Gold. Everybody, make sure to check out East Coast Red and Gold podcast today at 5 Pacific and 8 Eastern. They're having Jesse Sapolu on. They had Spencer Burford on last Thursday, so she's pulling some heavy hitters as far as current and former 49er players. So everybody make sure you check out Jess. She's there with Ty, Alston, Maddie B, and Bex. Great crew. I think Terradome's making some guest appearances, so a lot of fun there with those folks. Jimmy Perez saying hi to Jess. We got Jim Everett the Great. Oh, good. He wasn't blocked. He went away in one of my chats recently. He can be a little bit of a pest because he's a Rams fan, but I try not to block people. But I know I have a mod, and my mod blocked him one time, and he disappeared in the middle of a show recently, and I was like, oh, I hope my mod didn't block him again. And of course, I keep forgetting to check, but it looks like he didn't, so that's good news. Welcome, Jim Everett the Great. It says Stetson, Montana Magic. Bennett looks amazing in camp. So Stetson Bennett, the rookie from Georgia, is, I guess, the third-ish round draft pick for the Rams, 4th round, somewhere in there. And he's looking amazing. Well, that's great. I call him Drunk Purdy because he's kind of like Brock Purdy, but had some alcohol issues. I don't know. I thought Stafford was your guys' quarterback. You guys just gave him this big deal. You just finally got the last pick taken care of from the trade. I think the Lions picked wasn't it the guy from Laporta from Iowa?
Yeah, they got a tight end.
Yeah, with that last pick. So, man, you just got done paying him off. You're already throwing Stafford aside, Super Bowl champ. I don't know. Bottom line is we own the Rams. No worries, week 2 in Levi's South. Looking forward to that. We got Cinnamon Kiss in the house. Welcome, Cinnamon. Thanks for joining. Randy Daytona saying, oh, boy. I'm just going to leave that alone because I just don't talk about anything like that on my show. Yeah, I mean, I definitely I prefer burritos to wraps myself, but the rest of it I'm not going to read just because, I just try to stay out of those type of things. But I appreciate you being here, Randy, nonetheless. Everybody's just saying hi, hello. Okay, good. So we're caught up. So, Suneil, I was at camp day. You mentioned Rohan. I stood next to Rohan. and Brian Rennick was next to him, Brad was next to him, and then I had Raj on my right. So it was a fun day with some content creators and the non-VIP, kind of cheap seats, if you will, for,
Uh-huh.
49ers training camp. But, it was definitely a lot of fun, except for, I don't know. Well, I don't want to jump to the end. So I don't know. Did you have questions, or what have you been seeing? What are your impressions of what you've been seeing? I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously right now at the beginning of training camp. Not much is happening. Obviously, there's no pads. A lot of 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s. So, you kind of read between the lines. And obviously, when content creators are out there, they're trying to create content. Obviously, the headlines is the quarterback quote unquote competition or lack thereof. For me, I don't really see it as a quarterback competition. I think we all know Brock Purdy is QB1 for, I think, rightful reasons. Obviously, he's the only one on the roster that has proven to be able to win with this team consistently when he's given the opportunity. And then obviously we've heard a lot of great talk about Trey Lance looking a lot better than before. Obviously, people like Debo, mentioning that he has more touch. Every single person that's talking about Lance is talking about his quicker release. He's obviously working with the same quarterbacks coach as Patrick Mahomes, who's the best quarterback in the league. So you would envision him being a lot better. But to me, I think training camp is interesting. Obviously, every single day, people want to make these prophetic statements about who's in the leader in the locker room and who's better than who. And I just think it's a lot of narratives that aren't necessarily true. I think at the end of the day, practice is practice. You're working to get better at things, and when you're working to get better at things, not everything's always going to look good. So that's how I usually look at training camp.
And that's a smart way to do it. I am a little more knee jerk and just like, oh, this guy's falling, well, especially because I'm one of the people that really wanted a competition between Trey Lance and Purdy, and maybe we'll still get it, but definitely didn't see it today. Today, Purdy got all the snaps with the ones, and Darnold and Lance switched off with the twos, and Brandon Allen got all the reps with the threes. So Lance, Darnold, and Allen all got the same number of reps, and Purdy got more. Interesting, real quick, just want to say that Bryant Culp's in the house. He's saying, hey, Ted. What's up, Bryant? Bryant has his own podcast that he started. And he's a big Jake Moody fan, so he'll be glad to hear that Jake actually kicked some field goals today. Unlike yesterday, I saw different numbers thrown out there, but I thought it was kind of 30, 35, 40. I think somebody was saying more incremental numbers, but bottom line is some good. He was booming them for sure. I think he was letting off a little bit to not kick it over the fence, to be honest, on the practice field. Yeah, so I'm one of these people that Purdy has proven that he can win in this offense. But we haven't seen Lance with his new mechanics in a real game, and we haven't seen Lance with CMC, and we've barely seen Lance with Kittle. And so I'm just not willing to say that, Purdy is definitely better than Lance right now, especially coming off the injury. If Purdy had never been injured, sure, yeah, you got to let him start week one. But since he has been injured, I mean, I don't know that he's 100% physically. People are citing overthrows as the fact that he's fine. I'm I don't agree with that. People are saying, and even if he's fine physically, is he fine mentally? And we really won't know until it's real bullets flying. There were quite a few passes today where, I was talking to all the other folks I was there with, and it's sort of oh, do you call that a sack? Because I kind of call that a sack when you hold the ball too long or the pass rushers run by, and it's hard to tell without pads. Offensive line can't block effectively when they don't have pads to grab onto for the D linemen. But nonetheless, bottom line is I'm not willing to say that Purdy is better than Trey Lance right now, and I'm certainly not willing to say that Purdy would be better week one if Lance and he split first team reps, let's say, this whole offseason. But ultimately, people say, well, it's Kyle made the decision. Kyle must know. I'm like, well, Kyle, he wanted Mahomes over Cousins, and then he didn't get Cousins. Then he wanted, Jimmy
You mean
G over
Cousins over
Brady.
Mahomes? You
Sorry,
wanted
yes,
Cousins
Cousins
over
over
Mahomes.
Mahomes. Never got Cousins. He wanted Jimmy G over Brady when Brady wanted to come retire here instead of go to the Bucks. He wanted to come to the 49ers. He didn't get Stafford. And then even just last year, I point to if Purdy was our best QB in 2022, and it's hard to argue that he wasn't, then what the hell was he doing at QB3 to start the season? So if Kyle's so good at figuring it out in the offseason, I got some serious doubts about it. So
Well, I think it's a fair criticism as far as
and,
Kyle's
and
ability. Go ahead.
and the one thing I would just say real quick is like, hey, I'm a Shanna fan. I'm not like one of these fire Kyle people or anything. I know I could get there depending on how all this shakes out. But right now and the whole time I've been a Kyle Shanna fan, I call myself. So I'm
Well,
just starting to doubt his QB decisions.
I mean, I think it's a fair criticism as far as his evaluation of QBs that aren't necessarily on the roster, right? His ability to pick a QB and get them on the roster. However, it's pretty infallible that quarterbacks in his system play much better in his system, and when they leave his system, they don't look nearly as good. And you can list anybody from, Matt Ryan never looked the same after Kyle Shanahan left, Matt Schaub, Jimmy, Purdy, even guys like Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard. These guys are still in the league, but they're not, nowhere near, the type of play that they had with the 49ers. So I think it's different when you're talking about through the draft or, through tape versus on the field. I mean, Brock Purdy being QB3, I think was more about, just because Brock Purdy ended up being the best quarterback doesn't mean he necessarily was initially, right? All of those weeks of being on the practice team, and I'm sure he and being in that system, I'm sure he got better week after week after week. And I think that's one thing that people take for granted is, the growth of these quarterbacks once they get more and more reps. But the issue with Lance, and I'm a big Trey Lance fan, I wish that he ended like he would be the starter here when he first got drafted. However, one thing about Trey Lance is he's never shown the ability to separate himself through any of these training camps, and that's just something that I think is a combination of the fact that there's been some good quarterbacks in with the 49ers. I mean, obviously, for whatever you feel about Jimmy Garoppolo, he's still a top, 15 to 20 starting level quarterback in the NFL. And Trey Lance never separated himself from there, even though he was the bona fide starter in his second year. And even right now, Trey Lance is showing a lot of promise, but it's not necessarily separating himself from the rest of the pack. So if you're not able to ultimately show a huge gap in practice over the competition, you kind of have to lean off of what you've seen during the regular season. And Brock Purdy, as long as he's had a healthy elbow, hasn't lost in the NFL. So it's going to take a lot for, I think, Trey Lance to be able to overtake him and get that opportunity to start. And ultimately, even if he did win it out through training camp, he would have a short leash, if not from the coaching staff, at least from the fan base, because they've already seen how good the team has looked under Brock Purdy. So there's that pressure along with it as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I said all along it'd be really difficult for Trey to beat out Brock. Based on preseason, when Brock has 6 regular season wins and 2 playoff wins. But, if Brock keeps looking like he does today, which I would also say is super unlikely, it was his first day back to organized practice. So don't take, what he did too seriously. And people say, oh, it's the number 1 D he's going against. Well, is it? I mean, there's no Bosa. So, if you think this is the best version of our D today, I got some news for you. I think it's going to get a whole lot better when Nicholas Bosa reports. But bottom line is none of the QBs looked very good. It'd be one thing if one really shined and all the rest were bad, or 2 were really good and the rest were bad. But they were all pretty poor today.
And that's normal, Ted. Like through all training camps, the quarterbacks never really look good. Like, one thing you never hear out of 49er training camp is, man, these quarterbacks look awesome. Like, even when Jimmy Garoppolo was a starter, he's throwing 5 picks in practice. You know, Trey is, you know, similarly, you know, like, so I think that's kind of par for the course. People kind of forget each year that, like, they're working on things, you know, they're implementing things. And when you're practicing things that are unfamiliar, it's not going to be perfect, right? So I think that ultimately one of the common trends is the quarterbacks play better in the game than they do necessarily how they look in training camp.
Yeah, that was definitely true of Jimmy. People would say he was a gamer. I would say other than fourth quarters of playoff games, but yeah, in general, you know, we never saw him throw 5 consecutive interceptions in a game, obviously. So,
Right.
yeah. And what you said about, you know, quarterbacks playing better, you know, with Kyle than they do anywhere else. They never leave Kyle and go on to do better things. Totally agree with that. My thing, though, is one of the gripes I have with Kyle, though, is that he looks for QBs that fit his system rather than try to modify his system to fit the strengths of his QB. So that's one thing that bugs me. And um, but you know, ultimately, yeah. I mean, the guy. I do think he's a genius. I think there's a lot. It's not like I said. I'm not a fire Kyle guy. I just want him to learn and do better and pick the right guy this time at quarterback. And I don't know if that's Lance. I don't know if that's Purdy. But I do think that we need to find out. And I think that if Lance goes to another team and reaches his ceiling on another team, it's the type of thing that Kyle will never live down. And as fans, you know, who are, you know, more lifetime with this situation, we'll never hear the end of it, and with good reason. You know, it's like you move up, you get this guy with all these traits, you don't develop him, you go somewhere else, they develop him, and it's just like you got egg on your face forever. I think, especially if we don't get number 6 with Purdy and you let Lance go, that combo that's my doomsday scenario. So I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and once again, you know, you have to kind of trust. I don't think that Trey gets traded this season. Ultimately, we know that whomever starts the year as the quarterback doesn't necessarily mean they're going to end the year as the quarterback because of injuries and whatnot. But, you know, ultimately, even if Trey Lance does get traded and ends up playing well somewhere else, but Brock Purdy ends up, you know, playing just as well and, you know, is a, you know, franchise quarterback, quote unquote, then, you know, it is what it is. Like, ultimately, it's all about what's best for the 49ers. I think that sometimes people lose sight that however much invested we are, the coaching staff and the front office and all those guys are even more invested, because not only do they have their fandom on the line, they also have their jobs on the line. And, you know, Kyle Shanahan understands how pivotal this decision is, and that, you know, whomever he ends up going with, he's going to be tied to for the rest of his career. So I don't think he's taking the decision on lightly. I think he's done a really good job not allowing, you know, it to fester, you know, for whatever, you know, whether it be Jimmy Garoppolo and now Trey Lance. These guys could definitely be very disgruntled for the way that the quarterback conversation has gone while these guys have been here. And, you know, you didn't really hear too many complaints. You know, Trey Lance, we've heard rumbles. Maybe he's asked for a trade, but at least it hasn't hit the national media, or, you know, it's not a severe demand. I think that Kyle Shanahan understands that, look, one of these two has to be the guy, or he has to make a decision. And I think he's, you know, evaluating it that way. I don't think that it's not lost on him what the importance of this decision.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I don't have much faith in Sam Darnold, and even less in Brandon Allen. I hope it just bothers me that Lance and Darnold are splitting reps. I think that Lance needs as many reps as he can get, and so that bums me out a little bit. Brooks Anderson, official BNA Music, asked, "Did Kittle and CMC practice today?" Yes, they both practiced. CMC, we did a lot of running today. There's a lot of running, not a lot with CMC, but then a lot with Mitchell, a lot with Mason, Awatt, TDP, who was sort of the star yesterday. He was a little more normal today, and Laybourne also. So all the running backs got a lot of run today. I was surprised how many run plays there were. And, when you're there, you're kind of hoping for this QB battle, right? And so you want to see all these throws, and it's like run, run, run.
Yeah.
And I have the list of plays, and we can go through them if we have time, or we can skip them if we don't. It's fine. But
But it's funny, Ted, because there's so many interesting battles that
yes,
super important battles that need to be answered in training camp. And, I think a lot of it, obviously with pads, there's not much going on, but there's a lot of interesting battles out there. We need to see how well the right side of the offensive line does, who's going to end up getting that position on the other side of Bosa. Is it Cleveland Farrell? Is it, Drake Jackson? And then I think one of the most important positions battles is who's going to be the first cornerback off the bench, right? Because we are assuming it's going to be, Mooney Ward and Diamador Lenore as the starting two outside corners. I think the guy they got from Atlanta is going to end up winning the slot position, Isaiah. But who's going to be that next man up? Is it going to be Samuel Womack? Obviously, with Luther DL3 going down with injury, they signed somebody, but that's the real position, honestly, Ted, I'm most worried about, because we've seen the 49ers have good corners and how well the team looks with that. We've also seen the 49ers have bad corners and see how bad the team looks with that. And I think that cornerback depth now is a little bit up for grabs, because we don't have like a proven guy behind the top two starters.
no, we don't. It was interesting to me that Womack was taking reps there yesterday at outside corner, and that it was Isaiah Oliver and Quantrez Knight backing him up at nickel yesterday. I wasn't paying as much attention to defense today, so I'll have to look through some of the reports as to how that broke down today. But I thought that was interesting. I know Womack played outside at
In college.
yeah, I'm just trying to think of the name. Toledo, somewhere in Ohio. But bottom line is, yeah, corner is an interesting battle for sure. Ambry Thomas had a PBU today. I don't have a ton of hope for him, but I mean, I still a little bit of hope at least, especially because he was sort of a man specialist coming out of Michigan, and Steve Wilkes doing a lot more blitzing. You'd assume a lot more man coverage, so that gives me a little bit of hope that somebody like Ambry might fit the scheme a little bit better than D'Amico's maybe.
He was my biggest whiff. I was so high on him. I thought he was going to come in and light the world on fire, and he hasn't. That's one player that I hope. He's in question to even make the team. Like if any of these other corners step up, depending on how many roster spots they allot to corner. But he definitely hasn't been the third round pick value that he was drafted at.
No doubt about it. And I guess, one person that might displace Ambry is Darrell Luter. And I did see him warming up yesterday. He was the first person on the field. He was there before the dressed people, which was, I guess, Jair Brown yesterday was first and Huff second. Then Huff was first today of the dressed. But Darrell Luter was out there stretching, and he had on some kind of a, one of those sports tracker vest bra situations. And I was like, I think that's Luter. I was saying to Raj, and then John Chapman tweeted that it was. Real quick, just want to say hi to Paul Hope coming to us from across the ocean in jolly old England. So if you didn't live 5,237 miles away, I've taken you up on your training camp ticket today, Ted. We did find a home for the kit ticket. I think the guy who had originally had it found somebody around 10 o'clock this morning who was 10 minutes away from training camp and made it. So it worked out. But yeah, I was reaching out to all the content creators I know to let them know about the available ticket, because they're really hard to come by this year. And so a lot of top creators have had trouble finding tickets. And so I'm doing everything I can to help facilitate them and myself getting more tickets. He was saying, loving the training camp updates. Keep them coming. We'll do. And Fire Advisor game. I think he knows that his Presidente, Lee Gowland from the 49ers Faithful UK, sent me the link for this. I had him on a show, and I'd complained about how hard it is to find 49ers visors. And so he saw this one available and sent me the link, and so I ordered it. So thanks to the 49ers Faithful UK, and you can see their flag flying back here. But let's see, we got some comments here. Jason was saying, I always said that I don't want Trey to be just as good as Brock. He needs to be far and away better option. Absolutely. Yeah, if it's a tie game, you got to go with Purdy because of the experience and the proven track record. I just think that if Lance can hit his ceiling or even come close, he could be, noticeably better than Purdy, and that's what I'm hoping for. But it's not looking so far like that'll happen. But again, we don't want to jump to too many conclusions based off of just 2 open practices so far. Lots can change, so we'll see what happens. But what else we got? Brooke says start the watch on Kittle. If you know, you know. Oh, yeah. I mean, Kittle does have injury issues. He started, he missed the first 2 games last season, but hoping that all our big weapons can stay healthy. I mean, it's just, can you imagine like 2021 Debo with 2022 CMC with 2018 Kittle? It's just like, it's an embarrassment of riches for sure. It starts to make you think like you can't kind of plug anyone in. And Randy said something about that, like Thunderdome, four boys enter, 1 man leads. So we'll see who. I have a feeling it's Purdy as of right now, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and sometimes Shanahan tends to go with the what the players feel like, and I think there's the players have shown propensity to go with who they've won with, right? So Jimmy Garoppolo was obviously, the team was very high on him because they've gone to Super Bowl with him and whatnot, and now with Brock Purdy, them winning getting 2 playoff victories with him, and the 8-game winning streak. I think more players would feel comfortable with Brock back there than anybody else, just because they've won with him already. So that seems to be part of Shanahan's decision making as well.
Yeah, it definitely does. And again, it makes sense if Purdy is 100%, but if he's not, like, physically not 100%, and he's saying that he is, but then there's also sort of the mental side of things. There's like, do you trust yourself to rip it? Do you, have the timing down with your weapons? And the big one, which we won't know for a while, is can you stand in the pocket knowing you're going to get creamed, waiting for your weapon to come uncovered, and knowing that you're going to take a shot to do it. That's sort of a big one with these serious injuries. And for instance, Jimmy G was never really the same after his ACL. So I would never wish for that. I don't expect that, but it's something possible that you always have to keep in mind with serious injuries. And people say, well, it could happen to Lance too because of his ankle. Absolutely, it could happen to Lance. You look at Dak Prescott, had a very similar injury. And while he's still very effective running the ball, he doesn't run the ball much anymore. So I think he's still and with Lance, I always talk about him being able to throw deep, him being able to run threat. But honestly, a little bit less running for Lance is probably not a bad thing anyway. If his ankle slows him down a little, I think more time in the pocket could really benefit him anyway. So it could be a win-win in that respect.
Absolutely. I would love to see Lance just purely running the Brock Purdy offense, which I think, Shanahan was leaning into. You saw the way that Seattle game went before the injury. When Jimmy came in, obviously those same plays were probably going to be called for Lance. But unfortunately, Shanahan still does throw a lot of those power running QB options for him. But it would be nice just to see him play quarterback without, and, use his mobility more as a safety net versus, primary option.
Yeah, it was frustrating seeing all those design QB runs that were highly ineffective and, lowering Lance's QBR. A lot of people like to beat him up because it was low QBR. I'm like, well, a lot of it was just these really ineffective design QB runs that Kyle was calling. But then I saw the interview with Kittle where he was talking about like, hey, Kyle calls these plays like, and he knows they're not going to work, and it's like it's fine because he knows he's going to use what the defenses do to stop that play against them later in the game. It's going to break some huge play to Debo like we saw in the Seahawks game in the divisional round or the Rams game. Week 4 was it was week 4 because he was out week 8. Monday Night Football at Levi's, I was there when Debo broke that play all through the whole secondary. And a lot of times those plays are set up by unsuccessful plays. And you're like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And so that does kind of explain it. But obviously when Lance got hurt against the Seahawks doing it, then a lot of patience was lost for this sort of treating him like a fullback and running him up the middle. You can run Lance without running him up the middle, I think is the bottom line. And like you said, I think a lot of us would love to see Lance run the same plays that Jimmy and Purdy ran instead of this offense that Kyle put in for Lance that maybe doesn't even suit his strengths anyway. I mean, clearly the designed runs, I don't think they were all supposed to be ineffective, right? I think some of them were supposed to keep the chains moving. So I don't know. We'll see. Real quick, I want to say hi to Daniel Berry Sports Highlights. I think he might be a new viewer, and definitely a new commenter. So welcome to the show. And Bebop Jones here from Philadelphia area, great audience member, and also Steve-O's Customs. He makes custom sneakers. So if anybody needs custom sneaks, hit up Steve-O. That's Steve-O Supremo. You may have known him as, and you can find him here on YouTube and on Twitter.
Nice. And I was going to say, there had been some reports that maybe how athletic or fast that Trey Lance is, the 49ers were a little bit shocked that maybe he wasn't as athletic as they expected or as fast as they expected, which, okay, that's fine. If you realize that, why are you still calling these plays? You got to do what's best for your quarterback, put him in the best situations, and hopefully, we can see whomever the starter is, be put in the best situation for this team to win. And, it's going to be, the first half of the season, it's not, there's some competition there. So they're not going to have a lot of time or a lot of these gimme games, right? There's going to be some competition right from the jump. So if they don't figure it out quick, it could be one of those up and down first half of the seasons. And how many times are we going to expect the team to roll off these huge, long winning streaks in the second half of the season? I don't think that should be kind of what we bank on, is figuring it out the first 6 to 8 games, and then the last, 8-9 games we're like going to go undefeated. That's probably not the recipe for success.
Well, it sounds like they found you there. Suneil, the sirens are coming. You better duck and hide. But I agree. The slow starts are dangerous. You can't count on these hot streaks that we've had in 2021, and in 2022. It's not realistic to think that. It is nice, though, to finish the season strong, to go in the playoffs hot and healthy and rested. I always say that's better than a high seed, but I've been noticing that, it's interesting that Mullins is the only other QB that's had the same surgery, NFL QB that's had the same UCL repair plus internal brace surgery as what Purdy had. And it's interesting that they're both on the road. You could even say, there were so many similarities. A rusher coming off the right edge. In Dallas, it was DeMarcus Lawrence beating McGlinchey and then hitting Mullins in the right arm. And obviously Hassan Reddick beating Croft in Philadelphia. And I think when you're in a hostile, loud stadium like that, when a blocker gets beat, a lot of times they have something they say like fire or something like that alerts the QB if they're not looking that direction. Like, hey, I got beat, heads up. And I'm thinking in those away games, where it's so loud, the QBs probably didn't hear that. And so that could have been part of what led to both of these injuries. So it does make me think that, home field advantage would be a really nice thing to have beyond the fact that we're undefeated at Levi's in the playoffs and things like that, just from that one perspective alone, looking at those two injuries.
Yeah, and look, the last few years, the 49ers have done really, really good at winning 2 playoff games. Well, the difference between winning 2 playoff games when you start in the divisional round, or in the wild card round, and starting in the divisional round Well, that's the difference between making the Super Bowl and just making the conference championship. So, if the 49ers do get that bye week 1, we've seen in 2019, they made it to the Super Bowl once they had that first round bye. So that seems to be the path to success. So I think it is important that the 49ers do play for that number 1 overall seed, and especially with the roster that they have, the experience that they have, and the rest of the NFC where they're at, it seems like it's going to be a 2-man race between the Eagles and the 49ers. So I think it's important for the 49ers to really strive for that number 1 seed, get that bye, only have to win 2 games to make it to the Super Bowl, or 2 playoff games to make it to the Super Bowl. I think that's a much better path to success than what they've done recently over the last few years.
No doubt about it. And you mentioned that, we want to get off to a fast start, but it's going to be tough to do that in Pittsburgh, where we're taking on TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, who just got a contract to be the 10th highest paid defensive edge. I think he might be 11th now because I think Nwosu overtook him in average annual value on a slightly less overall contract, but for 3 years instead of 4. But bottom line, he's top 10-ish paid edge. And one of those 2 guys pretty much every play is going to be going against McKivitz. And we talked about questions at right guard or right tackle. Obviously, his first ever NFL start at right tackle will be in Pittsburgh. So I got some concerns about that. I've been saying that whoever wins the job to start week 1, it could end up losing because of it. I mean, not just the game, but obviously it's dangerous when you're getting sacked and hit by 2 of the. Well, I mean, TJ Watt is arguably as good as Bosa. I mean, I don't think he's quite as good because I'm maybe a little homer, but I think TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Bosa. And Micah, if he was full-time the edge, I could kind of put him in that conversation. But I think Micah is just a little bit outside because he's more versatile than those other 3, but he also doesn't play full-time edge.
So I think one of the biggest, I would say, one of the biggest misconceptions, or maybe something that the 49ers don't get enough credit for, is their ability to develop offensive linemen. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about McKivitz, not McKivitz. I'm talking about McGlinchey. Mm-hmm. But we saw what the league thought about McGlinchey. He went off and signed a very, very lucrative deal, and he was, always been ranked as one of the top 10 right tackles in the league, right?
Yeah, for enough to get us a 3rd round comp pick, in fact.
Yeah.
Right? So.
A lot of people were down on Aaron Banks after his rookie season for him not being able to see the field. Then in his second year, he moved to his natural position at left guard, and nobody was really missing, all that talk about, losing Armstead at that position.
Laken
Tomlinson. Yeah. Tomlinson at that position. There was no talk about missing Laken Tomlinson because of how well Aaron Banks did. You can say the same, Brendel has been in our system for a few years. He came out and, for whatever ups and downs, he ended up becoming a Pro Bowl level center, obviously because of, people not being able to play in the game. But, he did get that honor. And, I think a lot of people are really high on what Burford was able to do his rookie season and expect that leap. Colton McKivitz is a guy that's been in the 49ers system for quite some time. He came in, I think, right in that COVID year, and because of not being able to practice and roster spots and all that kind of stuff, I think he ended up being cut or put to the practice squad. But he's been in this system for, I think, 3 or 4 years. So I think that people are going to be pleasantly surprised. Do I expect him to be, this Trent Williams type anchor on the right side? Nah. I mean, obviously Trent Williams is Trent Williams for a reason. But I do think that he's going to hold his own. I think he's probably going to be better in the run game than he is in the pass game. But that's pretty much everybody on the 49ers offensive line outside of Trent Williams, right? So I've actually met somebody that practices with Cole McKivitz out in Arizona. They're part of the same management team and all that kind of stuff. And he told me, us as 49er fans are going to be happy with what we see from Colt McKivitz. And even though this is his first start at right tackle, he's come in at very important times in spot duty at starting at left tackle for the 49ers and held his own, right? The 49ers ended up getting big wins in those games that were must-win games with him at left tackle. So I think it's the easiest thing to like point to is, oh, Colton McKivitz, like it's going to be bad and he's going to be weak. Just like it was easy to point to McGlinchey because of how high he was picked. A lot of people expected maybe more out of him. But I think that this offensive line, for the first time in some years, has more continuity along it than ever before, right? 4 out of the 5 starters were starters last year that are coming back. And Colt McKivitz is not an unfamiliar player to these guys, and he's not an unfamiliar guy to the system. So it is important that right side, isn't a glaring weakness. I don't expect it to be. And I do expect this offensive line to perform, in that top, 7 to 10 range where they've seemed to have finished, the last few years, which I think outperformed where people may have placed them at the beginning of the season.
Absolutely. Yeah. Real quick, just want to call out Rick Diaz. He says, flying the flag in Chicago. Thanks, Rick, for tuning in. And then 187 in the house, same Bang Bang Niner gang. He's a big Brock Purdy fan. Thanks for joining 187. Happy to have you here. For offensive line, I trust Chris Forster, especially after last year, right? I mean, he said we're going with Banks, Brendel, and Burford, and we're going to ride with them till the wheels fall off. And the wheels didn't fall off. The one thing I would say about Burford was he did split time with Brunskill, who's gone. But I feel like Feliciano, a lot of people think Feliciano might even be better. So if Brunskill or Burford still does need to platoon for some reason, I think that might be an option for us if we're not just looking at him for center. I know I saw somebody say that they thought Feliciano and Brendel might have a center competition, but this offseason. But I haven't seen or heard anything of that since. In general, I trust the O-line. Obviously, McGlinchey was not that great of a pass blocker. We all saw the pictures, and everybody got after him for having some gaffes on some crucial plays. But he did play really well down the stretch of last season. He was always a really good run blocker, and I felt like his pass blocking was really pretty good too towards the end of last season. Even the Micah Parsons, where he got him up in the air and sideways and everything, it wasn't a sack. I mean, I'm sure it impacted the play, but I mean, the Cowboys didn't have a sack in that game. So, or maybe I guess they forced Purdy out of bounds behind the line of scrimmage. So I guess you could count that as a sack. But ultimately, for as bad as it looked, it didn't turn out so badly. So I'm with you. And McKivitz came in against the Rams week 18 of 2021, and then obviously week 4 of 2022. That same game I was talking about, Debo, that I was at. But he did hurt his MCL, so knock on wood, let's hope that McKivitz can stay healthy, because I don't like our options beyond that with Matt Pryor or Jalen Moore.
Yeah, that's once again something that is worrisome, right? So the backup tackle position, because I think outside of McKivitz and Williams, there's not really somebody that you trust anymore now that Brunskill's gone. And the backup, the cornerback 3 on the outside, right? Those are the 2 positions that I think are positions that are really, really important that a lot of people aren't talking about. So that's going to be interesting to see how through camp who kind of elevates themselves and really grabs a hold of those positions, because they're up for the grab. They're up for the grabs, and I think very, very important positions on the team.
I did notice today at training camp that there were quite a few plays that I marked as sacks, even though they ended up being completions because they don't stop the play, and most of those did come from the right side. I don't think Trent Williams got beaten at all that I recall. So, there's room to grow, but there's also time to gel, and they need to all get used to each other and how they play, and maybe we need to give more help as far as like Kittle or. I'm hoping that Braden Willis and Latu beat out Dwelly and Warner. Warner dropped another pass today. I'm just kind of had it with him. I will say. I mean, I guess he's more of a blocker, so he could probably still save himself that way. But I definitely want to see what these rookies can do with Latu and Braden Willis.
Yeah, I'm interested in also seeing some of the rookies and second year players along the defensive line too, like Kalia Davis. He's somebody who was out all last season, but the 49ers are pretty high on. He's supposed to come in healthy. Can he, be a player that could, play big in that rotation? Obviously, Kinlaw isn't a second year player, but there's a lot of talk about him being the healthiest that he's been. Can we see him turn into something? And then, Beal Jr., Drake Jackson, these guys, are they going to be able to, be a part of the rotation? Are they going to, especially Drake Jackson, is he going to step into that starting role and be able to take the opportunities of having a lot of one-on-one because of, the other three guys on that defensive line? Whomever's that fourth guy has to be able to take advantage, because they're going to double team Bosa. They're going to look at Ridgeway some way. So it's important to see.
You mean Hargrave?
Hargrave, sorry, I'm getting confused with the guy. The Hargraves, obviously, is going to see some.
I liked Ridgeway though.
Ridgeway is cool too. Same coming from the Eagles. That's how I got confused. But and then Armstead, obviously, they're going to pay attention to. So whomever that fourth guy is, whether it's Drake Jackson, Cleveland Farrell, I think is going to have a great opportunity to be productive.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because since Bosa's not there, Farrell's taking most of those snaps, and then Drake Jackson has got most of the starting snaps. But yeah, Farrell could displace him once Bosa's back. Who knows? And then Austin Bryant is the other one from the Lions, who's real tall with real long, skinny legs. He looks kind of like Daddy Long Legs, I was calling him. He almost looks like DK Metcalf. Almost. He's tall. He's real rocked up, but real long, slender legs for a defensive end.
Yeah,
so hopefully he can stay healthy. He's definitely had some health issues. So.
And the 49ers are going to have some money. They already have some money, and they're going to have even more once they end up getting the Bosa contract done. There's a guy like Yannick Ngakoue that's sitting out there still unsigned. Is that somebody that, they would want to bring in if, because Yannick, I think, would, make this defensive line even better, right? Because then you at least have somebody, can be extremely productive on the other side of, Bosa.
Yeah, no, Yannick would be a great option. I think we've got some money. I know we're trying to roll it over for next year, because I think I saw our cap hit right now is 271 for the 2024 season. But if we do spend some, I could see right tackle or defensive end being areas. But tackle's a little harder, because you can't just plug somebody into the offensive line. You'd have to trade for somebody. But still, I'm not ruling it out, that they might do it before the season starts or by the trade deadline if we struggle in that area during the season. We'll see. I mean, I think that 2024 first round pick is going to a tackle, whether it's in the draft in 2024 or at the trade deadline in 2023. I could see either of those options coming to fruition, but we'll see. What else we got? As far as other stuff from camp today, it was interesting that Purdy and Darnold both stayed after to throw some extra throws. Brandon Allen and Lance did not. But yeah, I mean, Purdy, I think he was like, some people had him 3 of 10 in 11 on 11. Some people had him 2 of 9. Depends on what you call a sack or whatnot. I will say that he had one deep catch to Ayuk, but it was badly underthrown, and Ayuk had to adjust backwards and fall to the ground to catch it. And so it was not what I consider a good throw. And it was also after pressure, so it could have been a sack as well. And then the nicest throw of the day, honestly, was Darnold to Debo on the left side, 10 or 15, maybe 20-yard throw. Not deep, but, intermediate sideline throw. And Darnold had another really nice throw. And then Purdy had a couple that he overthrew. Lance was not very good. He had a dropped pick and then really wasn't really himself after that, which you hate to see. But for me, I just want to see more reps for Lance. Um, I think if we're going to keep him, then we need him to be ready to play. And I think all this trying to find reps for Brandon Allen, I think it's a bunch of hooey. I mean, this guy, he's been around. He's 31. He has less than I think somebody was saying 1,600 yards total in what is it, 10ish years in the league. It's just like, I don't know. I just don't have much hope for him being able to guide our team. And I think the reps should be on our top three guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when it
Unless we're not
comes,
keeping Lance or Darnold. Maybe that's what it is that they're going to trade Lance or Darnold and they really think Brandon Allen's going to be the three. And it's up to Lance and Darnold to really duke it out for the two. But it doesn't seem like, at least as of today, that there's going to be any kind of competition between Lance and Purdy so far.
I mean, I just think that when it comes to quarterback, the 49ers have PTSD, and they just want to make sure that they have, like, they got down to their fourth quarterback last season. So I think because of that, where other teams might look at four quarterbacks and be like, why are we giving all these people reps? Because of what the 49ers have had to deal with, I think they're like, we need to make sure we're four strong at, for sure three deep, but I think they 4 deep too, based off of what they've seen, kind of thing.
Yeah, as interesting, you mentioned Kalia Davis and Kinlaw. They definitely both flashed yesterday. And the defense played well today, so it's probably safe to assume that they were pretty good today as well. I was saying I had very little hope left for Kinlaw, but I hope he proves me wrong because it'd be really nice to see that investment pay off after all this time. He's definitely lost some weight, and that could be beneficial. We'll see. But I mean, man, if you've got Hargrave and Armstead and Kinlaw and Kalia Davis all firing on the defensive tackles, and then Bosa and Drake Jackson and Cleveland Farrell all firing on the defensive ends. I mean, this is starting to look like maybe a pretty formidable D-line again, because last year our D-line was kind of anemic outside of Bosa.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because before we've had a lot of depth on the wings and not so much interior, and this year it's flipped where all of our depth is really on the interior, and we're questioning, do we have enough on the outside, which is something that's unique to this year, I think.
Granda Biggs in the house asking, how did Drake Jackson look? Drake Jackson's looked good. I didn't see any signs of fatigue, but that came 6, 8, 10 games into the season last year, so I'm not expecting to see that in camp.
And it's really hard to assess the trenches without pads, right? Like,
yeah,
there's not much you can do. Like, it really inhibits the moves that the offensive line can do and the defensive line can do when there's no pads and things like that. So you can only read into it so much, I guess.
Yeah, and usually that happens. Pads usually happen about 5 practices in, so that would be sometime next week. We're 2 practices in, open practices, and then sometime around Tuesday or Thursday of next week, you might expect to see pads come on. So we'll see about that. As far as record prediction for this year, Suneil, have you given much thought to what you think our record will be?
Yeah, I think I had them at 13-4.
So did I.
Yeah, I think that's what I ended up landing on, is 13-4. But before I didn't think it was as important to get the number 1 seed, but I've flipped on that. I think it's really important that the 49ers get the number 1 seed. And I don't know if 13-4 does it, but I think that should be goal number 1, is get that number 1 seed. I think making the playoffs is kind of a foregone conclusion at this point. I think that the team is good enough to just know that they're going to make the playoffs. I think now it's like, you got to get that number 1 seed. I think that should be the goal in the locker room, because of that week bye. I think is going to be key, especially with our roster, to have guys being healthy. And I'm so much more confident in them winning 2 playoff games to get to the Super Bowl than winning 3, because we've we haven't been able to show that in the last few years.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I was at 13-4 initially, and I backed off to 12-5 because we're minus 20 rest days, and there's like 3 teams that are plus 12 rest days, which is literally over a month more rest in a 4.5 month season. It's a huge advantage. And one of the teams that's real high up there is the Ravens at +9. So I was kind of saying, that's end of the season. We play them Christmas Day. That's when those type of things really start to show up in the season. So I had us beating them. I usually don't do specific games, and it may not be that specific game, but I'm just thinking 12-5 instead of 13-4 because also I saw another since I've been on that number. I saw a stat that said that we're playing 4 teams coming off a bye this season too, which is quite a high number. So compared to average,
I don't think 12-5. Definitely 12-5 might be borderline playoffs.
Yeah, no. You mean borderline missing the playoffs in the NFC?
Yeah, because you think about it, right? So Eagles, Dallas.
Yeah, that's it, and that's who I got in that top tier.
Eagles, Dallas, and then you like the team out of the NFC South, whether it's like Carolina, whatever, whoever, right? And then you have the NFC North, right? Minnesota, Green Bay, Chicago.
I got Lions. I got the Lions there.
Lions. So let's say you have the Lions, then Minnesota, Seattle.
I like
49ers.
Seattle. I mean, I hate them, but I respect them,
the Rams. We don't know what they're gonna look like. They're getting their quarterback back, and then there's always these teams that just come out of nowhere. So, 12-5, 11-5. I think because of those other divisions being where they're at, luckily, I guess
the Vikings looks scary good, but like their D, they lost to Darius Smith, they lost Kendricks, they got Danielle Hunter up for trade, so and they lost Dalvin Cook. I don't know, but the rest of their offense,
they should be coming back.
Hawkinson, and I think they drafted a pretty high running back. As Addison is the one who got the speeding ticket.
Yeah, so he should be slotted in as the number 2. I mean, and it might not be Minnesota, but I'm just saying, if Detroit ends up taking that.
Some people are saying the Bears.
Bears, Green Bay. We don't know. What?
No, not Green Bay. Come on, Jordan Love. No, Suneil, don't do it.
You don't know. We don't know.
Don't bet your rent money, Suneil. That's all I could say.
What I'm saying is that these guys, they've been a 13-win team, obviously with Aaron Rodgers. They're piecing things together. I don't know. It could be a dark. What I'm saying is we don't know. So
I mean, I've seen people say about Green Bay. I've seen them say look, they had Favre. They sat Aaron for years, put him in Hall of Fame Favre, Hall of Fame Rodgers. Why couldn't Jordan Love be Hall of Fame too?
And Jordan Love's from my hometown of Bakersfield, California.
Granted, it's different. It's a different regime, right? That's the thing that people forget, and it's so unusual to do 2 to get 3 in a row. I mean, come on. But yeah, I guess it could happen. He was first round pick. And he's from your home. Where's your hometown, Suneil?
Bakersfield, California. But
right on.
But what I'm saying is
far. Didn't Josh Allen grow up nearby in Fireball? Isn't that not too far from Bakersfield?
In I guess couple hours here and there. But all I'm saying is you start getting 12-5, 11-6. There's going to be a lot of teams in that realm, right? Because at that point you have the divisional winner. So I don't think the 49ers win the division with 11 or 12 wins, right? Because at that point, probably Seattle got to 13. So, they'll probably still make the playoffs, but...
You really like their draft picks in Seattle. Obviously, Devin Witherspoon and Jigba.
Well, I think that they're getting healthier, right? So Kenneth Walker is going to be a problem. Zach Charbonnet there, they have the three wide receivers, so their offense. I think Geno is underrated. I think that
They have
he,
three good tight ends. They're not stars, but they all block and catch
yeah, and
with
then they
Bisley and
they've
Parkinson
invested in the
and
defense. They brought back, Bobby Wagner, so they have that leadership there. And then the corners there, I think, are young, but they're still solid. So, they're going to be a problem. I don't think they were that far off. And I think that anybody looking at Seattle and sees that we're going to sweep them like we did last season, I don't think that that's a foregone conclusion.
I'm not saying that. I think we go 5-1 and split with Seattle. But I definitely think we sweep the Cards and Rams. And but Seattle, the thing about them is like their run D was already suspect. And what did they do to fix it? That's my big thing. They got Bobby Wagner back, but come on. I mean, do we really think Bobby Wagner's as good as like PFF does? I don't.
Yeah. They brought in some defensive linemen too, didn't they? Did they draft some guys?
They brought in Draymond Jones from the Denver Broncos, who's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Who's somewhat like DJ Jones. And they brought back Jaron Reed, who they let go to the Chiefs, and now he's back. But they also lost a couple of big guys.
I think that having elite corners, which they might be on pace to have because they brought in even more talent, that obviously helps out the run game as well when you can leave guys in man. And
if Jamal Adams is back as a safety, that's big because Diggs is really good.
Yeah, so I just think that the Seahawks are a definite challenge this year.
Al Woods is one of the guys they lost. And there was another big guy who's like 37. He's old, but he's a real solid run stuffing DT.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like they didn't do anything to make their run defense much better. I think we'll still be able to run it on them. But is that enough? I don't know.
They'll be able to run it too. That's the thing. They have a really good run game. They have, really good receivers and a quarterback that I think makes good decisions. So we'll see.
That's the one there though. Is Geno? I still have some reservations about Geno. If he, if the glass slipper falls off Cinderella Geno,
Yeah,
I don't know if he turns back into a pumpkin or not.
The season's going to be interesting for sure.
Because like after we beat them in Seattle, they went on like a 5 or 6 game win streak to make the playoffs to come lose to us in the wild card round. And the QBs that, and I know it's not QBs don't play each other directly. I know, but it was like 5 or 6 really awful QBs that the Seahawks beat. So anyway, I guess we'll see. I just think that I think they narrowed the gap, but I think there's still a gap, and I think we're still numero uno. I think 12-5 wins it for us. I think it gets us close to the number 1 seed in the NFC. I think the Cowboys are up there with us. I think the Eagles are, but I might have the Cowboys over the Eagles, oddly enough, and a lot of people don't. But, the Cowboys picked up Brandon Cooks, and they picked up Gilmore, and they really only lost their Dalton Schultz. And when we played them, it was really clear, like, he's not a game breaker. He gets a lot of TDs for fantasy or whatever, but he's not a guy who you can, like, hand him the ball and be like, win the game for us. They clearly had no confidence in him to do that. So, at least not against our defense. But with the Eagles, like, everybody loves all their draft picks and everything. But I'm like, hey, they're draft picks, guys. Good draft picks hit 50% of the time. And 50% of the time,
But they don't need any of those draft picks.
They don't hit.
They don't need it this year.
Sure, not they do. They lost Hargrave to us. They lost all their inside linebackers. They lost.
But they already had guys.
They got some rookie safety that they traded for guys that might be as good. I don't know. I just think there's a lot of question marks on that team.
They have elite corners. They have elite defensive line. They have an elite offensive line. They brought in Swift. They have,
although they did lose Somalu off the O-line, and they lost Miles Sanders, and they lost Shane Steichen from their offensive coordinator, and we know that's important.
But Cipriani is an offensive-minded coach, so who knows what Steichen really is doing.
Or Sirianni, I guess. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see. I
think the Eagles
I think they're right there with us in the Cowboys.
Eagles are 1, 49ers are 2, Cowboys are 3. That's
I
how
think
I
it just
got it right now going in.
depends on QB. I think if Purdy plays as well as he played last year, I thought we had a 50-50 chance of beating them in the playoffs if Purdy stayed healthy. I thought it would come down to basically whoever had the ball last. And and the Cowboys, honestly, when we beat them, if Tony Pollard doesn't get injured, that's a whole different ballgame. He didn't play the entire second half,
Hmm.
and he was electric. He was one of those guys. You give him the ball, he can win the game for you, along with
Right.
CeeDee Lamb. Right, those two guys are difference makers. Also, Diggs had that big dropped interception. Those two things go differently. I think maybe we lose that game. I'd say different game for sure, but maybe even lose. So I don't know. Yeah, I think it's those us three, and then like Lions, Seahawks, and
The Saints, I think, are going to be
Saints. I
better
think they'll
this
be
year.
the division winners. If Ritter is good for the Falcons somehow, I think they did a lot of good things for their defense in the offseason.
Panthers brought in some talent too, so
If somehow the Vikings fix their defense, maybe they could, but I haven't seen it on what they've done.
yeah. And
And
Chicago could
maybe
be
the
a dark
Bears.
horse, yeah.
Maybe the Bears. Yeah, I like Justin Fields. I've always liked Justin Fields, and I always
And they
said,
got him a receiver finally, so
yeah, exactly. They got DJ Moore, and I always say a quarterback needs at least decent protection and at least reliable weapons, and I don't think Fields has had either of those things so far. And so now it's kind of put up or shut up time for him because they got some O-line help and some of the O-linemen that they had or that were injured or coming back, and you got some weapons. So we'll see what Justin Fields can do. It'll be interesting for sure. Um, and then looks like on this news from today that Joe Burrow, I think it's just a calf strain, luckily not an Achilles, like a lot of people thought. So that's good. I mean, when I saw him reporting to camp, I'm like, what the hell is he doing reporting to camp with this deal not signed? Like, this guy is about to get the highest paid deal in NFL history, and he could have lost it all today if that is not at all, but I just don't think the Bengals are going to sign him to the richest contract ever if he tore his Achilles today. So
right.
it's risky business, and I can see why Bosa's staying out, especially with the fifth year, like where he doesn't get penalized and we can free up the roster spot. It's like kind of no, it's a not painful to either side right now. But I know we were going to try and keep this to like an hour and 10 minutes. We're coming up on that mark. Suneil, did you want to go ahead and plug things you have coming up again? Your
Yeah,
regular
the only,
shows?
once again, thanks for having me on the show. Only thing I have this
Absolutely.
week, Saturday, day after tomorrow, Rohan and I are gonna stream and just kind of go over what he saw at training camp and kind of button up the week. Don't know exactly what time quite yet, but stay tuned for that. Other than that, man, appreciate you having me on the show.
Absolutely, Sunil. It's been a pleasure. And for me, I set the same tomorrow morning. I've got Shaw Show, Anshul Shaw coming on at 10 a.m. Pacific. Then at noon Pacific, I've got Dr. Pandya, the injury doctor for 95.7 The Game. And then at 3 p.m., I have Jeff DiMatteo, who's a 49ers panel expert that I met on a different panel show. So busy day tomorrow. But then, training camp on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday next week. So I'll have more reports and more videos and all that kind of good stuff. But Sunil, I really appreciate you being on. Just say, peace and go Niners.